Hi, it's Dawn from Dawn's Dirt. Dirt can be gardening, it could be growing things, it could be tomatoes, it can be politics, it can be religion. Dirt can be anything you want it to be. And I'm very excited to have my business coach, Kaylor Betts, here today. So welcome to my show today, Kaylor. Thanks for coming.
Delta Dawn, what's that flower you got on? Did I do good? Is that was in baritone, just so you know.
Go. And I want to say something. I want to say the first joke that came to my head, and it was maybe keep your day job, Kaylor.
Oh, ouch. Well, you know what? You know why that joke doesn't work? Is because I don't have a job, Dawn.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so welcome here, Kaylor. Could you just start off by telling my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first off, I love that song. You know what? And it's so funny. I mean, I obviously heard it when I was, way back when I was a kid at some point because I recognized it, but then it got resurfaced and it was trending on the internet recently. And as soon as I heard it, I'm like, oh, that's such a good song. Yeah, it was like trending audio on Instagram. And, I thought of you because I'll be honest, you're the only Dawn that I know. Know a lot of people, but you're the only Dawn that I know. And immediately I'm like, oh man, I bet you Dawn likes that song too.
I've heard that song so many times, and I'll be honest with you. When people say, "What's your name?" and I'll say Dawn, and I'm like the crack of dawn, and then I sometimes turn around and like pretend to moon them. But yeah, that's I'm a big personality, so
That sounds on brand for you. Um, and you could also use like Delta Dawn, potentially. Um,
do you remember the toilet paper wars of 2020? Are you worried about being prepared in an emergency? Are you tired of being a slave to the corporations we purchase from? It's time to take back control. Become ungovernable. Take your food system into your own hands. Hi, I'm Dawn, a coach dedicated to helping you live like grandma used to. Self-reliant, resourceful, and prepared. Whether it's raising chickens, growing a garden, canning your own food, or even milking a cow, I'll teach you how to thrive in the space you have, big or small. Visit Dawn's Dirt today to book your free jumpstart call. Together, we can get you self-reliant and ungovernable. We, the people, have the power to take back control and change our world. Remember, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. Let's build a better future, one skill at a time.
yeah, well, speaking of big personality, I would say I'm probably a big personality as well too. I kind of forget your question, but I think it was to introduce myself, tell people what I do. Look, I'm going to give you the summary and the overview. So I am someone who struggled for most of my life. I like to say I was in a battle with my mind because that's how it felt. I really struggled to even get out of bed in the morning, and I often would have rather just laid back and when my alarm clock went off, just go back to my dreams instead of face the reality that was my life, because my life was something that, it really felt like I was walking through life and I had a fan blowing into me as I walked through life. And, to make a long story short, I ended up going on a relentless, obsessive journey of personal growth and studying how people win in all different areas, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And I did that because I just made the decision of like, I'm just tired of doing this. I don't want to live as though I'm walking through life and there's a fan blowing in front of me. I don't want to rather live in my dreams than the reality that was my life. I'm done with this. And I really ultimately came to the conclusion that no matter what path I chose, it was going to be hard, right? Like if I made the shift and I actually went on a relentless journey where I took responsibility for my life and showed up and built mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial wealth, I knew it was going to be hard, but I also knew that everything's a trade-off. I mean, I thought, well, my life right now is really hard, so I better just choose which path ultimately is going to serve me in the end, and I may as well just go for it. And there was just always something inside of me that, even if it was just a fraction sometimes when I was at my lowest points, that just believed that I could actually have a life where I felt free, ultimately. So what I did was I studied, like I said, and I just slowly but surely started to make shifts in my life. And it wasn't pretty. It sure as hell was scrappy. I embraced the scrappiness. There were still ups and downs, but ultimately things started to move in the right direction. And I started to get a lot of momentum in the right direction. And that fan started to slowly just come behind me as I walked through life. And now it feels like the fan's behind me. Everything just kind of fell more easily into place. I started businesses and a lot of them went to shit and didn't work, but I kept going. And as Winston Churchill says, success is going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. So I just didn't lose enthusiasm, and I just kept going and going and going, and picked up. And I really believe you either win or you learn. So I learned. And then, I ultimately came to the conclusion after, many goes at it. And in terms of business, I ultimately decided to start the business that I have now, which was turning my mess into my message and talking about my breakdown and how it led me to a breakthrough. And as young Pueblo says, he says, a hero is someone who heals his own wounds and then helps others do the same. And that's really the path that I'm on, is I'm really talking about the wounds that I healed, essentially, in the areas in which I used to really suck at and quite honestly be a degenerate in, and the areas in which now I thrive. And now I'm helping others do the same. And what I really do, just to summarize it for people, is I really help people get out of their own way. We work a lot with the subconscious mind, and I help people wake up and develop the confidence so they can get out of their own way. And then we help them take that confidence and actually put it towards building a business online that actually sets you free.
I love it. I love it, Kaylor. I love that you took your bad experiences of your past and you learned from it and you actually got entrepreneurial. I too am very entrepreneurial. I know how to run businesses better than I know how to work for businesses. I learned that this summer the hard way. And yeah, you took the bad things in your life, turned them around, and are now not looking at self, but looking and seeing how you can give to others. And I know I've experienced that through your program. And yeah, I love that it's not inward, it's taking everything and going outward.
And let me speak to that. So we help people, one of the terms we like to do is we help people become ungovernable. Really, the businesses that we're helping people build, and the business that I've built, is I think as ungovernable of a business as possible, meaning you're ridding yourself or freeing yourself or creating sovereignty and autonomy away from the systems, and we could call it the legislation, the governance in our external world as much as possible, right? You can never, I suppose you could completely remove yourself, but it's hard. Most of the time, the goal is to remove yourself as much as possible. Now, what's really interesting about that, though, is it starts with self-governance and inner legislation, meaning that's where the majority of your freedom is. It's actually not outside in the external world, the government. We could talk about all the dangerous trends that are going on in our society, and I'm the first one to speak about them, and they absolutely are something we have to stand up and say no to and pay attention to. But at the end of the day, that's where maybe 10, 20, 30% of our efforts should be. The other 70, 80, 90% should be in creating a life where you self-govern to create autonomy and true liberation and freedom in your own life.
I love that. And as a woman who is strong, bullheaded, I don't listen to others very well. If you tell me what to do, I'm going to say, I'm going to do this my way, even if it's good advice. I like to learn the hard way. So, maybe not a good trait, but.
Can I say something about that, Dawn, though? You are extremely coachable, though, in our program. Like, you are very much allowing of me to come in and really, even challenge some of because look, you want to build a business or you want to build anything, whether it be your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, or financial health, you need to do what I did as well too, which was find someone who's done it and then essentially surrender and understand that there are patterns that need to be challenged. There are beliefs that need to be challenged, because if you want to get to a place you've never been, you got to do and think in a way you've never done. So you could have fooled me. I think what you're really good at is knowing who can influence you. I don't think you let people in easily that can influence you. But when you know that someone has some things that could even challenge the way you're looking at the world and the way you're doing things, I think you're very good at discerning in that way.
Thank you. I will take that very much as a compliment. And yeah, you're right. Respect is earned. And I learned that through 16 years of not a great marriage. And so, yeah. And when it comes to, you just said, what did you just say? You said something about changing perspectives and changing who you are. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be barefoot and pregnant, and I wanted 8 kids. That was my whole goal. And that's what I said to my ex-husband back in the day. And when we built the greenhouse, when we built the farm, and I had to eventually, because of my strength, I'm just naturally a strong person. I had to pick up all these drop balls, unfortunately, behind a man, and I picked them all up, and I became this very strong, fierce, independent woman, farming on my own, which was, I'm so proud of where I've been, and I'm looking forward to my future. I just got to get there, and so I'm on my next journey of finding the next mountain, and so changing again. And yeah, thank you for pointing out that I need to allow myself to be coachable.
I recognize that in you because it's in me. I do not let people influence me easily, and I think that is one of the best traits you can have, because I think we're actually not much of a product of the 5 people we hang out the most with. I think we're a product of who we let influence us the most. And for me, I agree with you. Like, I let some people influence me greatly, but I do not give that privilege away easily. I really take a look at, does this person, in the realm in which I'm looking for support or mentorship, do they have what I want? Would I trade places with them in a certain realm? Like, so if I have a mentorship in a relationship, for example, like, do they have the marriage that I envy? They don't have to have anything else. They just have to have the marriage that I envy, and I will let them influence me in relationship in that category, or business, or fitness, right? Or health, or whatever it is. So, but, it also speaks to your journey, Dawn. I also relate to your journey because there's a lot of people who are very confused about why I'm single as well too. Because, I have traditional values, and I very much believe in masculine and feminine dynamics and energetics. And yeah, like, sure, the ideal situation is I would be married and have kids right now, and I would have the mother of my children, and we'd be building our empire and together. And this, feminine rock, this feminine energy that I have in my life, we would come together and make this really powerful union, and we would make this incredibly profound team that we build mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial health together. But it hasn't worked out that way, but that's okay. Like, I'm taking a little bit of a different turn in my life, or, it's a shift that I never anticipated happening. And, it's never going to look perfect, and you embrace it. And I love what you're doing. And then we're kind of doing it in reverse. Like, we're doubling down on our business and building our lives in that way. And we're doing it and creating sovereignty individually first, and then going for a union. Because, people say to me all the time, oh, how are you single? And this, that. It's like, because like, the stars kind of have to align for that. Like, it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers and going out and finding the right person. So like, sometimes you got to do it in a bit of a different way that's not necessarily ideal and doesn't fit the bullshit picture in your head of the way you think it needs to be. But that's not always a bad thing.
Yeah. My mom actually said to me, I said, someone said, what's your goals and hopes and dreams? Like, what's your dream, Dawn? What did you wish for? And I said to my mom, I said, it hasn't changed since I was 5 years old. I've always just wanted to get married and have babies. And the babies part, I've got 3 children, 3 beautiful teenagers. That's probably past for me, but the dream of just being a housewife again. And people are, every time people hear that, they're like, what, you, Dawn? Because I've been such a powerhouse and independent. But yeah, the thought of just being a stay-at-home mom and, eventually probably a grandma, like, that just sounds so beautiful.
Well,
yeah.
it's kind of, yeah. And I think that's beautiful. It's kind of similar to, well, I would say a direct parallel is how you can have a man that is so in touch with his emotions and his feminine side, and be such a good meditator, such a good facilitator of a heart-to-heart conversation. He can, dance with you and play with you and be creative with you, and he can be so in touch with that side, but yet I do think that in terms of being a man, there's something in our essence that we are in our elements when we're also leading in a union, right? So I would say that every man yearns to be appreciated and respected for being a leader, even though he could also be someone who's incredibly able to step into his feminine. You're the same way in a parallel of you're incredibly good at stepping into your masculine when you need to.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you're going to feel in your essence and you're going to feel like you're achieving your highest potential when you're in your feminine.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a fundamental thing right inside every woman. So I was down in Cuba on a trip last year, and there was this strong lawyer woman, and we were sitting at the table with her sister and her brother-in-law, and even she said, if there was a right man that could just lead me, I would love to be led. And the brother and sister-in-law, no, the sister and brother-in-law, they were like, they snapped and they were like, what? You? And she's like, yeah, even a strong woman wants to be led sometimes.
Can I bring up probably the perfect example? I actually haven't finished it because I had to end up going to bed, but I watched most of it. The Martha Stewart documentary on Netflix. Have you watched it at all? No? Okay. So Martha Stewart.
TV, sorry.
Yeah, that's fair. That's on brand for you. I didn't anticipate you watching much TV, which is admirable. I like to watch a good documentary or something here and there. But so I watched this Martha Stewart documentary, and, you know, she was the first female billionaire, right? Like, this woman was as much of a business powerhouse. She was the original influencer, and she was an absolute animal and weapon in the business world. And she disrupted a lot of, you know, perspectives on, like, you know, women can't, you know, build empires and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So, but never was able to find, similar to what we're talking about, the man who could really just allow her to, outside of her business, just surrender and submit and let him be the rock and the leader. You know, I really believe that women in a union are more of the architects. They're like, they like guide the ship. And I think the man leads it and drives the ship. You know, I think that's a generalization. It doesn't mean in every single, this is where people get tripped up, right? It's not every single second of every single moment, but it's just ultimately at large. That's what I think makes a great union, is that masculine and feminine polarity. But Martha Stewart has never found that, still to this day. And I think she's in her 60s, or, you know, I don't know. Yeah, I'm guessing at least in her 60s. And you know what? She does not strike me as a very happy person. You know, she is very cold, and she has always been cold. And her reputation has, she's always been very rude to the people that she works around. I'm sure she has a sweet, you know, lighthearted side to her. And ultimately, at their core, I believe every human is a good person. But I think that is a really good example of what happens when a woman is only ever in her masculine all her life, building her empire, and that she damn right built an empire, but never really had that man to come in that she could just be able to have be the rock, so she could just be in flow for a good part of her life. And I think this is a judgment, no question, and maybe I'm wrong, but it does seem like she's paying the consequences for it.
I can see it for sure. And that's where I've tried to, in the last year for sure, since selling the farm, not having the stress level, not having the $1 million of debt anymore, where I've just kind of let go, and I'm trying to be in my feminine. And yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, you're building the right business and doing the right thing for being able to build something that still allows and offers you the space to be able to be in your feminine. It's not about being in your feminine 100% of the time. It's just like me. It's not about being in the masculine 100% of the time. I have to be in touch with my feminine. I have to step into that as well too. Otherwise, you do get very dysregulated. So yeah, Donna, I think you're doing great. And just like with me, I'm open for, you know, when it's supposed to happen, it will.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I just want to say too, like for me, what's happening is I love people. Like the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is, and even doing what I did, farming with people. I've said this story over and over and over again. You know, I traded vegetables with the lady who brought her food bank vegetables to my table. I filled a bag of vegetables up and traded them with her. It was not a fair trade, but it was what I was able to do. It was what I was able to give. And what I was able to give, and I gave a lot of vegetables, but it was not me, it was him. And so I just feel like in this shift, you know, doing what I'm doing, I still have that feeling that I need to just give and give to people and loving on people is what drives me more than anything else. Like I don't even care about a dollar in my pocket. I care about and love people. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And look, with what you're doing, you can largely be in your feminine. I mean, look, it's not like you're the CEO of a company. You're the CEO of a big company. You're all day long, you're having difficult conversations, setting boundaries, saying no, you're firing this person, you're presenting and doing, you know, a board meeting here. Whereas with this, it's like, it is about community connection. It's about people. It's a very people-oriented business. It's also a very creative business because you're putting out content. That's a creative aspect of it. You can be playful, like, and I want to say a quote from the Martha Stewart documentary that
Okay.
people might take literally, and probably some people won't like it, but I just thought it was an interesting quote, and I think you'll appreciate it to at least some degree. Martha said, you know, I've always loved this quote that says, if you want to be happy for a year, get a husband. If you want to be happy for 10 years, get a dog. And if you want to be happy for a lifetime, grow a garden.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, exactly. Well, I can attest to that actually, because when I had 20 acres of garden and a 36,000 square foot greenhouse and 2 stores that were running and 30 people on payroll, that was stress. That was, you know, I loved it and I thrived on it, but it was stress. And this year I had a little greenhouse with a little garden and a few chickens, not 299 chickens, a couple of chickens, and it was just fun. It was fun to play in my garden this summer, and I've never experienced that before. I've always experienced just the grind and working and pushing and doing, and it was just fun this year.
I'd imagine that growing a garden, being engaged in your garden, playing in your garden, I would imagine that that is up there with one of the healthiest, purest, and most spiritual practices that we can do. And I'm gonna amend that quote. I'm gonna say, if I make it my own, I would say, if you want to be happy for a year, get the wrong husband. If you want to be happy for 10 years, get a dog. And if you want to be happy for a lifetime, get the right husband and grow a garden together.
Oh my.
How about that?
Well, and that's the team part. And again, I don't mean to bring my ex-husband and my past relationship into it, but that's what was missing on my farm actually, was that teammate. I just picked it all up and I just did it. And yeah, it's where I did it because I had to and I thrived at it, but it's not what I wanted. I wanted a teammate and a partner and a best friend and a lover and all the whole package.
But it's made you, like, it's a part of your journey. I really believe that these are opportunities for growth. And I do really believe, although maybe it's overused and at this point slightly cheesy, but I do believe that things don't happen to us, they happen for us. I think we can find opportunities in every difficulty. I think you either win or you learn. You know, it's as simple as that.
Well, and I guess it's back to what you said just at the very beginning. Like you picked yourself up and you just pushed forward. Like you just didn't let yourself wallow in the self-pity and wallow in the whatever. You just picked yourself up and said, I've got to change it. And you were the change in your own life. And, you know, I went to your event there in September and you kept saying, or I've heard you say it before, you are the mountain. And yeah, we are the mountain. And the only person that can change our situation is us. Like I'm the only one that can fix my situation. So I better just put on my big girl panties and just do it, right? Like,
yeah. I would say that, look, I think everything's a trade-off. I really do. And I think that what's really important is to maybe amend that message of like, you know, I didn't dwell in my sorrows, or I didn't feel sorry for myself. I didn't play victim. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't, I was all of those things. Like truly throughout my whole journey, I was all of those things. And I still feel that way sometimes. I'm still afraid of judgment and fear, I'm still afraid of judgment and criticism, and I still get afraid and I still get anxious and I'm still sometimes depressed. And, I still have all of the elements of the full spectrum of the human experience. I just don't let those things stop me, and that's the thing. I think we need to allow ourselves to like be human. And I think that feeling the full spectrum of what it means to be human is actually a really powerful thing. The only question is, are you going to let those things stop you and get in the way or not?
I am actually surprised to hear you say that, because from the outside, you always look so perfect and put together and things like that. So thank you for being vulnerable, actually, and saying that you don't always have it together behind closed doors. Wow.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's really easy to look perfect when you're just showing up and, you're on Instagram, or on a podcast, or, you're kind of showing your highlight reel. And I really try not to do that. Like I try and always be open about, what I'm experiencing, and especially on like the hot seat episodes, which is you were on one, like, I'm pretty open on that episode. I'm pretty, real and raw. And that's the goal, is to not just show the highlight reel, but it's also really hard even if you try. I mean, I mean, look, my life is leaps and bounds better than it used to be in terms of just like, I really have my shit together in comparison to where I used to be. And for the most part, every day I feel like a pretty high functioning, high performing individual. But don't get me wrong, I have my moments where I'm overwhelmed. I feel like, fuck, is my life a hot mess? Is my business a loosely functioning disaster? Am I really as healthy as I think I could be? Or can I be more fit? Could I, oh, I made a bad choice there, or man, I made a mistake, or maybe I lose a deal, or, whatever it is. I go through these things. I just don't let them stop me. And that truly is one of the biggest keys to success and winning, is just like to really understand that there's highs, there's lows. As long as you keep going, like Winston Churchill said again as well, if you're going through hell, keep going. And on a long enough time horizon, if you just play the long game, if you just keep showing up, 80% of your success is just showing up. So really, the only way you can ultimately fail on the macro, your true desired state, your North Star, your overall mission, the only way you can fail is if you quit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, and I was a farmer for many years. Like, I can remember saying in the month of March, well, there's always next year, when you lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in a year,
Yeah.
there's always next year. You just plant the seeds again next year, and you just have to keep going. And I've done that for many years. I love it. I'd like to chat for a moment about self-governance. You're about self-governance, but I would like to bring it back to food. And so um, part of the thing with my farm was I was able to provide food. During COVID, I had people coming to me and they were saying, "You've got food, right?" And I'd say, "Yes, I have food. If things go really sideways, come to my farm. We'll figure it out. Like, I'll figure it out." I've always said I'll figure it out for many, many years. And so when it comes to food and self-reliance, what's your thoughts? If the grocery store was to shut down tomorrow, what's your plan, or what do you think people should do?
So my belief in that is that, just like how I said, 10, 20, 30% of our freedom lies in the external world. It does matter who's in power in the government. Policy does matter, regulation matters, taxes matter, fiscal policy, the economy matters, the stock market matters. All of these things matter. But what I think matters more is doing everything you can to create a life where you separate yourself from that system, so you're not dependent and a slave to that system, so that if shit were to go sideways, you'd be able to be pretty damn self-sustainable. Or, because remember, like, yeah, if shit goes sideways to an extreme degree, we're probably all screwed. I'm going to be honest, and maybe not everyone agrees with that. I mean, unless you're like really remote and you live that way 365 days a year. But if there's a nuclear holocaust, if our grid completely goes down, if our supply chains are completely wiped out, like if we aren't able to get like any food, like all of those things, if they go sideways, there's going to be very few people who aren't totally screwed. Um, but what I think we always need to be prepared for is things, and COVID was one of the best examples of this, is things can go sideways like 20%. Things can go sideways 30%. Things can go sideways 50%. And I think that in our lifetime, I don't want to say it's likely, but it is absolutely plausible that a situation like that could happen. So for me, I absolutely want to be prepared. Now, being able to sustainably eat, if things were to go sideways, is a major part of that, right?
Mhm.
And that's what I've really woken up to over COVID is like, I'm not in that position. So what is my plan? Well, here's my plan. Because if people were to look at my life and how I'm actually operating right now, they would probably say, well, Kaylor, you're not really prepping for that. You're not prepared for that. One of my favorite quotes is, the same things that get you out of Egypt are not always the same things that get you to the promised land. So I have my promised land life and desired state and my goals and my targets. And that involves me having 2 different properties where I have and it can execute my city life, my business life, because I do like a city and I love the city life to a certain extent. And then I also want to have, and I don't know where it will be. I mean, I don't know. I could see it being in like somewhere down south, a little warmer, Arizona maybe, or something like that.
It's
Or
dry
maybe,
there to grow vegetables, but just say it.
yeah, okay, well, this is why I need help. Um, or Mexico or something like that, right? Mexico would be better.
Mhm.
So I want to have some sort of like more remote, sustainable property where I can grow food and I can have goats and chickens and cows and, grow vegetables and all the fruits and all the bits. So
Mhm.
that's the promised land for me. But right now, I'm getting out of Egypt. Right now, I'm putting disproportionately all of my efforts into building my business to a point where, and also a big part of that too is finding the mother of my children. Now, it's not that I'm waiting for that to happen before I can do any of these things, but that whole picture I just painted, finding the mother of my children, creating a family, creating that sustainable household, creating that sustainable property that has, farm and animals and all this stuff. Man, there's a lot of pieces to that. And that's probably what I'm going to do in the next 5 years. But I've disproportionately, like I said, been putting my effort into building my business, which gives me all of the resources, the means, whether it be control over my schedule, my time, autonomy to be able to move and go anywhere I want, financially, you know, um, control over like building a machine that I can separate myself from, and my team as my business. If I have to, build out the farm, or, whatever it is, that's going to take time. It's going to take all these resources. So that's where I'm at. It is absolutely in the plan, and it's the dream, to be honest. And I would say I'm in the midst of making that happen, and I can't
Yeah,
wait.
I love it. One thing I also respect about you, Kaylor, is that you are not an extreme kind of guy. Like there's lots of people I know who have the same thought process as we do. They have the different glasses on. But you're not just wallowing in that fear or that extreme, like, what do I do? And I need to prep and I need to this and I need to that. I love that you are just living in the moment, preparing for the future, and not just so far down the rabbit hole that you just don't even know which way's up anymore. And I really respect that. And just you're doing things step by step by step. And for me, I think the first step is growing a garden, right? Just planting some vegetables, getting, the experience of how to grow food, and, having a few chickens. I think everyone should have a few chickens in their backyard. You should get some chickens for your balcony maybe, or
Yeah, I have a balcony. But yeah, I mean, look, that is in the very near future for me. But like, look, to me, look, you got to look at, because some people would say, well, Kaylor, you need this tomorrow because things are going sideways in the next year or two. And it's like, well, you don't know that, number one. And if things do go sideways, yeah, okay, I'm willing to accept that I will be, pretty unprepared at that point. But what else am I going to do? Like, am I going to sit around and fret? Because, like, that's to get all of the things I want to do to be fully prepared is a lot of things to do. But I've already started. Like, first off, I have gold and silver, and I'm starting to look at that. I have some, so fiscally, I'm looking at I have cash on hand. I have some crypto, and I'm starting to get more into that, more into gold and silver. I am also, I have food at home. I have things that will last in my storage unit. I have jugs of water. I'm working on getting a med kit, for, emergency medical stuff in case things go sideways. My mom's freezer, we fill it with meat, look, I'm taking steps at generators, like I'm taking steps in that direction. I live in an apartment right now, so, a garden would be possible for me to start this summer on my balcony if that's, a good option for me at that time. But I also don't even know where I'm going to be. I don't even know if I'm signing another lease in Kelowna here. This is where I live, and I'm just testing it out. Like, that's what's hard for me, is I don't even know where I want to lay down my roots yet, right? So, because I feel like the mother of my child is probably outside of Kelowna and somewhere out there. And when I meet her, I'm probably going to, want to build a life in and around where she is, and hopefully she's in a beautiful place. But yeah, so, look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit around and worry and fret about it. I'm very optimistic and hopeful about the next 5 years. I really am. I really, really am, especially now that, Trump won, and with the Maha movement and all that stuff. Like, yeah, could things go sideways? Sure. But I don't know how much use it is for me to sit around and worry too much about it. I'm going to take it as it comes and slowly but surely get things together. And I would say in the next 5 years, I'm going to be one of those people that you really going to know for the apocalypse.
Yeah. Like me, because I would know what to do. Yeah.
100%. That's where you're ahead of me, right? Like, and this is where I'll let you influence me on that kind of stuff, right? Because, like, I'd trade that situation in a heartbeat.
For sure, for sure. But yeah, I just appreciate that I see people sometimes wallowing in it and fretting in it and worried in it, and it's almost too much. Like, we've talked a few times about extremes, and I don't know, I think the extremes of everything, the extremes in left, the extremes in right, the extremes in, everything I don't think that's healthy either. I don't know. That's just a thought of mine, that if we get caught up in the extreme, you're not looking at the present, and you're not necessarily looking at the people in your community right around you, and then in what you're doing right now in the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, anxiety isn't a good strategy for the apocalypse, It's like, if you're really worried about things going sideways, of what use does, like, a little bit of anxiety and concern is useful, because that's what's driving me to be able to be prepared. But, if it's an amount that's starting to disrupt you living the life that you want to live, and it's starting to disrupt you being able to go out and just, like, execute the things that you want to execute in your life, well, now it's of no use. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why. You know what? There's a very thin balance between excitement and anxiety. And there's even a good quote I heard the other day where it's like, the only difference between excitement and anxiety is breath. Because when you're anxious, you're holding your breath. And when you're excited, you're breathing. But it's the same thing physiologically in our body. It's the same thing going on. So I think, like, for me, like, it's actually weirdly exciting to know that the world could go sideways at any moment. Like, I know people are going to think that's messed up. I'm not saying I love that idea and I'm, like, so excited every day because, like, we're going down in a bad trajectory in some ways. I'm just saying that it's all the human experience, all of it, the dark, the light, the risk, the adventure, all of it is beautiful to me. It's all part of the experience. And, like, quite frankly, I think it's important that we are in a position where things could go sideways at any moment, because if we weren't in that position, well, would we really ever be grateful for what we really have if we knew it couldn't all be gone in any moment? So that's just kind of how I think about it. So who am I to sit here and judge it to a point where I have to be dwelling on it all day long and riddled with anxiety because of it.
I love that. I want to talk about leadership. In your view, what's the single most crucial quality of an effective leader, and how can someone develop it?
I think the two most important qualities of a leader, I think there's three that come to mind. Number one is you got to lead by example. So the best way to lead is by example. So if you're not actually leading by your actions and how you go out and you live your life, you're not a great leader. I think the second thing is that you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good listener. You need to be able to. There's so many leaders who are just all about talking and talking and talking. This is something I've had to work on because I can definitely talk, is to actually listen to your team, your community, the people that you are leading, your family, whoever you're leading. You got to listen. You got to be an exceptional listener. And then I would say the third is you got to be confident. You know, you have to have almost, if you want to be a really good leader, you almost have to have a delusional amount of confidence in your mission. You know, you also have to, you almost have to be slightly delusional. I think particularly if you are going to lead a big movement, I think you have to be a little bit delusional, because if you actually were completely rational about it, I even kind of look at what I'm doing. If I was completely and entirely rational about it all the time, I think it might chip away at a little bit of my confidence. You know, I think the ones that are delusional, you know, it's kind of like what Steve Jobs said. He said, you know, the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are often the ones that do.
I agree. It's a little bit of ego. You need a little bit of ego, and whether that's real ego or even faked ego. I know when I had my farm, I had a bit of an ego, but it was the front. I'll be vulnerable and say that my ego and my overconfidence sometimes is a front for an insecure little girl underneath here, just, you know, still shy and, you know, not. And so, yeah, the ego part, I think real leaders, you can see that with Trump. He's got a little bit of an ego. You have to be almost overconfident.
So, I'm also watching a documentary on Winston Churchill on Netflix because I'm fascinated by Winston Churchill. And he talked a lot about that. He said, any human who is famous, highly successful, leads a large movement, it's always to some degree rooted in an inferiority complex. Meaning, in some ways you feel inferior, and that's so deeply within the subconscious that you actually end up overcompensating, and it often is the reason why you end up working those long days and you end up not taking no for an answer. I mean, like, I resonate with that incredibly. I 1000% have an inferiority complex, meaning, you know, I was hurt in my childhood enough, and, you know, it's probably because I didn't graduate high school, and the system that we used to measure success told me I was a failure. And so, you know, it's stuff like that. And then I started to believe I wasn't intelligent. Everyone was worried about me and they didn't think I was going to do much. Like, I have a fucking chip on my shoulder because of all that. And it is one of the reasons. I think it's literally like when I'm about to shut it down for the day, because like I've been going hard, it's truly what I think just gives me that little extra. It's what allows me to push for like an extra hour, or to push through the weekend and work a little harder. And yeah, you know, some people will say that that's like toxic, or, you know, that's unhealthy. And it's like, I don't know. I think it's a monster that if you learn how to manage and leverage properly, yeah, I mean, everything's a trade-off. So yeah, do I suffer the consequences of it? Have my relationships, has my inner peace, has my energy, has my nervous system, has my hormones, have they all been affected? My health, have they all been affected by my overcompensation of ambition and drive to make up for the inferiority complex? Have I suffered? Have I sacrificed? Yeah, but it's brought me to where I am today. It's Like I wouldn't have this business, I wouldn't have this life without it. So everything's a trade-off.
For sure. And I get that with my farm because I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And yeah, you don't get it handed to you. If you don't ask the question, the answer's no, right? And so there's a little bit back to the ego. You have to be bold and ask the questions. You have to be bold and push. You have to be bold and work hard. I know when my little kids were in the grocery store, we'd go through the grocery store and I'd hold their hands and they'd ask for a candy. Mom, can I have a candy? And I'd look at, honestly, my 2 or 3-year-old and I'd look down at them and I'd say, go get a job and you can buy it yourself. Like I'm not buying that for you. Go get a job. And yeah, my kids, my oldest two, got jobs at 13. Like they work hard because that's how I'm training them is, it's not going to be handed to you. It's not going to be given to you. You have to go and work hard. And so back to leadership though, like I think there is a bit of ego, but in my experience in my where I've been through owning my own companies and now having 2 jobs over this past summer, I've learned so much. The lesson has been invaluable in that if your ego is too big and it's only self-serving, that's a problem. Whereas leaders that lift their team up and come underneath them and say, how can I serve you and how can I help you and how can I lift you up as a team? I think that's where the real power is, helping someone, not a handout, but just helping them and listening, like you said, listening to the bottom and lifting the, how can we serve you and how can we help you and how can we make changes? It's the front line that had the answers in a big corporation or a business like that. It's the front people. It's the people doing the work. They have the answers. They know what's going on. And if you just listen to them and serve them and help them, and you can lead them even better. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say that if you have an inflated ego and you operate very egoically, and that inferiority complex that we're talking about is the main driver of your actions, your behavior, and what you say, I'm not going to sit here and deny that you can't build something big. I mean, I think we see it. I mean, Martha Stewart might be an example of it, right? Like, and I think you can do big things in the business world. You can become rich and you can, so I'm not going to sit here and say you can't lead and build something big. But what I think is that that's an unhealthy way to lead. And I think that ultimately it does actually set you up for failure. I do think that some of these psychopath like billionaires or, people who run companies or people who are on Wall Street or whatever, when they lead in that way, I almost feel like they're always at risk of eventually on a long enough time horizon, something bad happening. They get hit with a lawsuit and funny enough, Martha Stewart, got locked up for insider trading and lost a lot of value in her company. And, so you can do it that way. I just think if you want to kind of ensure, I believe, that you can win on a long enough time horizon and you want to have a healthy community and business, team, family, I think when you lead from the place like you talked about where, yeah, maybe you're leveraging a little bit of that inferiority complex, but you're actually a great listener. You're a people first kind of person. You're a mission first kind of person. You're willing to, emotionally regulate through situations, be conscious, have difficult conversations, operate from love instead of fear. Like when you do those things, yeah, I'll even say sometimes it might even hinder like just on paper success. Like it might even make you make less money in some situations. I don't know. But what I'm saying is I'll take that trade-off any day. I'd rather lead from that healthy place rather than the toxic, unhealthy place. And I think in the end, you're just going to find that overall net, you're just going to win much more.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was talking to a man, a successful businessman the other day, and I was asking him about his journey, and he told me a story. And he said he went from being a car salesman to now he runs successful businesses. He's just here in the town of Olds. And he said that when he got his first sales job as a car salesman, they told him that he had to lie and he had to, do all these things that weren't great. And he said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do it my way. And if there's a scratch on the car, I'm going to point it out. And he ended up being the top sales guy just because of his character and who he was. And that just set him up for, success in other businesses. And yeah, I love that story. And that's how I ran my farm. And yeah, I think it's important in business.
Because let's take the used car salesman example. That's a great example. So let's say there's a salesman who doesn't point out the scratches or doesn't point out and isn't honest and transparent about maybe some of the downsides or something that they know and they're trying to hide it or whatever. Yeah, maybe at first he makes more sales because he doesn't point it out. Maybe he does trick some people into, but again, and then maybe the other one who's being honest, maybe he starts off a little slower but on a long enough time horizon, you know what's going to happen to the guy who doesn't point out the scratches on the car? His reputation is going to take a hit in some way. He's probably the one who sexually assaults a girl at the Christmas party, his fault too, right? Because like these people have no shame and empathy. So he'll probably end up having some sort of scandal, or his reputation or he'll get hit with a lawsuit or get fined because he lied, or he's probably stealing money from the company, or, whatever. And again, it might get you farther to begin with, but I think on a long enough time horizon, eventually, there's, as Buddha says, there's only three things that can't be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's that good versus evil, like doing the right thing is sometimes hard. Being the good person and doing the hard thing is sometimes hard, but the trade-off of being the evil or doing evil or whatever is it's just not worth it. And yeah, when I had my farm, my customers, if they weren't happy, I made them happy. Like that was more important to me, that a customer was happy. And if I had to give away free tomatoes, I did it, because that was more important to me, is the teamwork and the camaraderie and the community and it went back and forth than anything else. Yeah.
It's so true. I mean, I always say this, like I'm relentless and you know what? I'm not going to even, again, I'm being really transparent here. I'm sure my ego plays a role in this, but like I refuse to let any of our customers go through our process, any of our clients, and ever be able to point their finger and say, this wasn't a good experience, or they didn't do enough, or they didn't swear. And I'm not saying we never drop the ball. We drop the ball. We're not perfect, but I'll do anything. And I mean, we even, had a conversation at one point where we almost parted ways, and I was like, get me on the phone with Delta Dawn and let's chat about, and man, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on your podcast, but
we can. It's all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was, willing to do whatever it took. And I'm like, Dawn, don't leave us. Here's what we can do. And here's what, and I think that's when you approach your business that way, when you actually care less about the money, because it really doesn't come. Look, I love money and I'm not afraid to admit it. And I think everyone should love money and try and make as much of it as you can. But when you actually genuinely care about the people you're doing business with more than the money, what's beautiful about that is you will feel better at the end of the day. They will feel better at the end of the day. The world will win at the end of the day. And then again, on a long enough time horizon, even if you sacrifice money in the beginning, on a long enough scale, you'll make more money as well too. And that's just a nice side effect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dawn can be difficult too. So
no, you know what? You're my cup of bone broth though. So, but that's the thing, right? Like, so I do think that you would be a difficult client for some people. I would be a difficult client for other people, but for the wrong people. When, like, I don't find you, I know you don't jive with everyone. Guess what? I don't jive with everyone as well. But you have not been difficult because it's aligned. Like, even when you're not maybe, I don't want to say cooperating, because it's not like you don't cooperate, but even when you are maybe when there is resistance or whatever, like it's easy for me because I just get it. Like it's aligned. And I think that's really important.
We're very similar in many ways. I've learned that over the course of getting to know you over this last year. So
yeah.
Just as we finish off here, I'm just going to ask you, because you are Kaylor Betts, you're like my celebrity here. Just feed into your ego a little bit here.
Pretty generous, yeah.
So any last thoughts? You're on my podcast, and so any last thoughts for my listeners and my viewers here?
Well, I'm just going to say the first thing that came to mind. I'm pretty passionate about the overawake, underachieving crisis. I know a lot of the people that are listening to your podcast and that listen to me are awake, quote unquote, meaning, awake, meaning they are aware of the lies that were being sold from the government, school system, Western medical establishment, mainstream media, big food, big pharma, and they're aware of it. But I think that often people stop there and they think that just being aware of the lies is enough. But I think what we really have an epidemic of and a crisis of is people not going out and actually doing something about it. We talked about self-governance, inner legislation. We talked about building sovereignty and autonomy in your own life and liberating yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And I would say that, and this isn't like a direct criticism to everyone listening, like you need to do more necessarily. I know I'm generalizing here, but I do think we all need to do more. I need to do more. I think, and I'm not saying burn yourself out perpetually, be in your masculine and just, burn the candle at both ends and overtax your nervous system and disrupt your hormones and all that stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, really sit down and understand that we have one of these human experiences. I do believe there's something after, but not this. We have one experience and we're a ghost driving this meat suit on a floating rock in the galaxy. So we may as well just absolutely go for it. And I don't think most people are living as though like they understand that one day this human experience is going to be over. And that's what I'm really trying to do, is kind of what the Stoics say is memento mori, like meditate on the fact that this will be gone one day and you should live as such. So I really, really believe that people need to hear the message of stop being an overawake underachiever, less rabbit holes, less learning, and more implementation and execution. And that will be one of the most powerful forces that will lead you to ultimately winning and liberating yourself like never before.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's like my little kids, go get the job and then you can buy the candy. But without doing, if you don't get the job, you're not going to do it. And so, yeah, just go and do it. Take steps and don't be lazy and just go do it. And so I love that.
100%.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being on the show, Kaylor. I really appreciate your time and coming here today. So how can people find you? Probably most people know about you, but in case there's someone listening that doesn't know about you, I've met a few people that don't know about you. How can people find you?
Yeah, so if you want to check out my social channels, you can go to @the Kaylor Betts is my personal Instagram. We also have a really cool page called Awake and Winning. That's our brand. So you can look that up on Instagram. And if you enjoyed this podcast, then you're probably going to enjoy the Awake and Winning podcast, and you can find that wherever podcasts are found.
I love it. I love it. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dawn.